Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy, like it had something more than just paper inside. I found it on my doorstep just after 6 in the morning, tucked neatly beneath the morning paper, like it had been delivered by someone who didn't want to be seen. My hands trembled when I picked it up. The handwriting on the front, loopy, feminine, too familiar, sent a shock down my spine. Julia? Her name wasn't anywhere on it, but I knew. My sister always dotted her E's like tiny question marks, curled her J's like she was writing with a paintbrush. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there in my robe, barefoot on the porch, staring at it like it might explode. The cold Oregon air bit at my skin, but I didn't move. That handwriting hadn't shown up in my life for over 4 years, not since she testified. I remember the courtroom like a bad dream. Julia sitting in her pressed navy blazer, all poise and practiced empathy, describing in soft tones how I had rushed to judgment, how I misrepresented the truth in my investigation on Senator Rollins. Her words weren't overtly cruel. She'd left that to the senator's legal team, but they were enough. Enough to shatter my career. Enough to let the story unravel just before it landed. And everyone believed her. After that day, the only thing louder than my public disgrace was the silence from my family. Mom stopped returning my calls. Dad died before we could make peace. Julia moved on, climbed her way into the PR world on the back of her polished betrayal. And me? I became a ghost with a blog. Now here was this envelope. I took it inside, poured myself a mug of stale coffee from the night before, and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't tear it open. I slit the top carefully with the letter opener I hadn't used since before everything fell apart. Inside, a gold-embossed invitation. Please join us for Julia Foster's 35th birthday celebration. An evening at the Foster family vineyard. Formal attire requested. I stared at the RSVP card. My fingers brushed the return envelope already stamped, already addressed. Like she thought I'd just say yes. The nerve of it. After everything she'd taken from me, she wanted me to put on a dress, smile for the cameras, and toast to her perfect life. I stood up too fast. My chair scraped against the tile. I could have thrown the whole thing away. I almost did, but I didn't. I sat back down, picked up a pen, and scrawled my name across the RSVP card in heavy, angry letters. Then I slipped it into the envelope and sealed it shut with my thumb. She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd come to the party. Let them all see the ghost they buried. Let Julia see what happens when you try to rewrite someone else's story. The Foster estate looked exactly the same, like someone had pressed pause the moment I left. The front gates were still that deep hunter green, polished to a high shine, with gold initials twisted into the iron. F, for Foster, of course, for family, for fake, if I was being honest. I drove up slowly, gravel crunching under the tires of my old Subaru. Every corner of the vineyard was manicured to perfection. Rows of Pinot Noir vines stretched out like soldiers. The roses Julia had insisted on planting along the edges when we were kids. A touch of European elegance, she'd said, were in full bloom. It made my stomach turn. How beautiful everything still was, like my ruin had never happened. I parked near the guest house and stepped out into the sharp autumn air. My boots felt too dusty for the pristine cobblestone walkways. I was already out of place. Then I saw her. Julia stood at the top of the main steps in a wine-colored cocktail dress, holding a glass of something pale and sparkling. Her smile widened as I approached. Too perfect, too polished. Like someone playing a role in a play she'd written herself. "Emma," she said, drawing my name out like a surprise. "You came." She wrapped her arms around me before I could react, squeezing tight, her mouth close to my ear. "So brave of you," she whispered, and then pulled back, all smiles again for the crowd behind her. Brave? That wasn't what this was, but I didn't answer. Inside, the house was filled with soft jazz and the clink of expensive silverware. White-gloved staff floated between guests carrying trays of truffle crostini and pinwheel steak bites. It was all so curated, just like Julia liked it, clean, upscale, superficial. I spotted our mother standing near the fireplace, wrapped in some taupe shawl that probably cost more than my car. Margaret Foster had aged like a statue, graceful, cold, and impossible to read. Her expression didn't change when she saw me, just a single pointed nod. "Emma," she said, her tone as flat as I remembered. "You look, well, a lie, but whatever." "Thanks," I replied. "Nice party," she hummed, already turning away. I wasn't here for her anyway. Then I saw him, Mark. He was standing near the bar, tall and stiff in a tailored suit, his eyes scanning the room. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw it, the shock, the recognition, the history. He hadn't expected me. Mark Caldwell, Julia's fiancé, a respected corporate attorney, and once my best source. He started to approach, but Julia was already beside me again, guiding me toward a group of guests like I was some novelty on display. "This is my sister Emma," she said, arm curled around mine. "She's doing freelance work now. Very brave of her to reinvent herself after everything." Her voice dripped with fake warmth, and I smiled tightly, every nerve in my jaw screaming. By the time she gave her toast, raising her glass and laughing about how proud our parents must be to have two successful daughters, I was numb. And of course, she added, Emma's had quite a journey, from headlines to home blogs. There was polite laughter. I just looked at Mark, who wasn't laughing. He was staring at me like he knew something he wasn't supposed to remember, and just like that, I knew why I'd come back. Not for revenge, not yet, but because something here still stunk. And this time, I was going to find it. I stepped out onto the back veranda for air. The sunset dripped gold across the vineyard, and for a second, I forgot where I was. Until I heard footsteps behind me. "Emma?" I turned. Mark. He looked older than I remembered, less invincible. His dark suit was sharp, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there back when I used to meet him in parking garages and late-night cafes. Back when we were digging into Rollins' political shell game, exposing shady shell companies and bribes disguised as consulting fees. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said carefully. I took a sip of the too sweet champagne I'd grabbed just to keep my hands busy. "You and me both." He ran a hand down the back of his neck. "I didn't know. Julia didn't tell me you were coming." "Yeah, I figured." I looked out over the vines. "You clean up nice, engaged to the queen of PR now." He gave a dry laugh. "Believe me, that was not the plan." Then quieter. "Not like this." I didn't say anything. "I wanted to say something," he said, voice low. "Back then, when everything went down, I was stunned. I read her testimony and thought, hell, I thought maybe I missed something, that maybe you had cut corners." I turned to him slowly. "You believed her." His eyes dropped. "Yeah, for a while." My throat tightened, not just because of him, but because it confirmed what I already knew. That Julia's words had carried more weight than mine, that her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. "But now," he said, taking a step closer, "I've seen things at her firm. Quiet conversations, weird contracts. I didn't want to see it at first, but I think..." He exhaled hard. "I think she helped them bury it." "Your investigation." My heart thudded. "You think?" He nodded. "There's a file, not labeled directly, but it's redacted press memos. PR prep guides for damage control tied to Rollins' name. Julia's initials are all over the routing trail." Of course they were. My hands clenched the railing. So she knew. She knew the story was real, and she sold me out anyway. "She told people you fabricated sources," Mark said quietly. "That you broke journalistic ethics. You were a liability." I stared at him. "And you still got engaged to her?" His jaw tensed. "I didn't know that then." "Do you know it now?" We stood there, silence stretching. Behind us, the party buzzed on. Strings played a safe cover of some indie ballad. Glasses clinked. Then I heard Julia's voice again, chipper and controlled. "Mark?" She walked toward us, eyes sharp despite her smile. "There you are," she said, wrapping her hand around his arm. Her eyes met mine. "Hope you're not dragging up old war stories." Mark stiffened beside her. I smiled. "Just catching up, lots of history." Julia's smile faltered for half a second before she leaned in. "Don't get too comfortable, Emma. This is my night." "Wouldn't dream of stealing it," I said, but she looked uneasy. And that told me everything. She wasn't afraid of what I might say. She was afraid I'd start digging again. And she should be. That night, after the party, I drove straight past my motel and out to a storage unit just off the highway, Unit 217. I hadn't been there in over 4 years. Not since the tribunal. Not since everything collapsed. The key stuck a little in the lock, like even the door was reluctant to open the past. Inside, under a musty blue tarp and a forgotten IKEA shelf, sat 2 plastic bins labeled Senator Rollins Notes in black marker. I'd boxed them up the week after I got fired, thinking I might someday come back to it. Back then, I wasn't ready. I'd been too angry, too hollowed out. Now I was ready. I pried off the lid. There it was, my original research, transcripts, interview notes, email printouts, even my first draft of the story, all of it untouched. I flipped through the timeline I'd assembled. Rollins' campaign donations, the offshore accounts, the real estate purchases made in his cousin's name. My story had been airtight until Julia stepped in. Her testimony had hit like a wrecking ball. She hadn't just said I was sloppy. She'd suggested I had created fake evidence, that I was emotionally unstable after a breakup, that I'd been desperate to break a big story, and I'd never known why. But now, with what Mark said about the files, the memos, her initials, I had a reason to start digging again. I grabbed the hard drives. I still had my old laptop in a drawer at home. It didn't boot without plugging in the power cord at just the right angle, but it worked. And it still had the encrypted files I'd backed up, everything I couldn't bring myself to delete. The next morning, I called the one person I trusted with sensitive data, Alex Ramirez. He used to be a junior analyst at a regulatory firm, a whiz at tracing digital trails. I'd protected him once when he blew the whistle on a hedge fund's cooked earnings reports. Got him out of a tight spot. Last I'd heard, he was consulting out of Seattle. "Emma," he said when he picked up. "Wow, I didn't expect to hear from you." "I need your help," I said. "And I think it's time we reopened the Rollins file." There was a pause. "I'm listening." Within hours, I had a secure upload set up. I sent him everything, my notes, hard drive images, every thread I remembered chasing down. By nightfall, he called back. "I think I found something." Alex sounded wired, excited. "You remember Julia's PR firm?" he said. "Check this out. There's a leaked internal memo from the week before the tribunal. It was sent to Rollins' legal team. Subject line, discrediting strategy, EF. My heart jumped. EF, as in me? As in Emma Foster. There's a bullet point list. Push narrative of ethical concerns. Emphasize past emotional distress. Leverage insider testimony from JF to create credibility gap. JF is Julia. Her initials are all over the metadata. I sank into the edge of my couch. "She sold me out," I whispered. "Worse," Alex said. "She framed you as unstable and unreliable, so Rollins' legal team could neutralize your investigation before it went public." She handed them the bullet points. "And she still got promoted," I said bitterly. "Still built an empire." "She didn't just throw you under the bus," he said. "She helped them protect a criminal." I sat in silence, feeling everything at once. Rage, grief, a sharp clarity I hadn't felt in years. That was the night I stopped feeling like a victim. She wanted to bury me. Now I was going to bury her story. Piece by piece, page by page, and this time I'd have the proof. Clara Walsh answered the door with the kind of hesitation that told me she already knew why I was there. She'd aged a little since the last time I saw her. Softer face, shorter hair, but the tension in her shoulders was the same. The kind of posture you develop when you've spent years being careful. "Emma," she said, blinking. "God, I didn't think you'd ever reach out." "I wasn't ready," I said. "But I am now." She opened the door wider. "Then you'd better come in." Her apartment was modest, cluttered with books and potted plants, quiet in a way that felt intentional, like a space designed to keep noise out. I sat at her kitchen table while she poured us tea, her hands steady despite the slight tremor in her voice. "I've been waiting for this," she said finally. "I always knew you'd come back to it." To her, Julia. Clara had worked under her for 3 years. Executive assistant, office gatekeeper, media whisperer, the girl who made things disappear, until she quit out of nowhere, just months after my career imploded. "What made you leave?" I asked. She gave a bitter laugh. "You." I stared. I read your exposé draft, she said quietly. The one Julia had me delete from your drive. She told me you were unstable, that you'd made it up, but it didn't feel fake. And then I found out she'd met with the senator's team, twice, off the record. I saw the calendar entries before she deleted them. I leaned forward. You kept proof? Clara got up and crossed to the bookshelf. From behind a row of dusty cookbooks, she pulled out a yellow folder, worn, creased, but thick. I didn't know what to do with it, she said, handing it over, but I couldn't throw it away. Inside was a timeline. Meetings, email summaries, phone logs. Every interaction Julia had with Rollins' people during the 6 weeks leading up to the tribunal. Most of them marked private in her calendar. All conveniently wiped from the official records. Holy hell, I whispered. This is everything. There's more, Clara said. Julia wasn't just helping them discredit you. She was angling for a contract with Rollins' media team. It was all transactional. Sink you, get rewarded. I stared at her, stunned. Clara shrugged, looking tired. I didn't sign up for that. I got into PR to help tell stories, not to bury people. We sat in silence for a moment. She'll come for you if she finds out, Clara said. You know that, right? I know, I said. But I'm not alone this time. She gave a small smile. Good. Then she slid something else across the table. Her resignation email. Attached was a memo she'd written to HR, warning of ethical concerns in the office. It had been ignored. But now it was going to matter. With Clara beside me, I didn't just have documents. I had a witness. And Julia had no idea what was coming. Mark called 2 nights later. I just finished rereading Clara's timeline for the 3rd time when my phone lit up. Unknown number, but I knew it was him. Emma? His voice was tight, like he hadn't decided whether to talk or hang up. Can we meet? We ended up at a coffee shop off Route 18. One of those quiet roadside places with vinyl booths and bad overhead lighting. He was already sitting when I got there, tapping his thumb against a paper cup like he was waiting for permission to say what he didn't want to admit. I confronted her, he said, before I could ask. I sat down slowly. Julia, he nodded. I brought up the memo. The meetings with Rollins' people, the way she testified against you. And, I asked. He let out a dry, almost bitter laugh. She acted like I was imagining it. Gaslighted me so smoothly, I almost believed her again. Said you'd had a breakdown, that you'd doctored evidence to get revenge after your article was rejected, that it was all personal. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Mark looked down at his hands. I believed her once. I let myself believe that you might have crossed a line. I should have known better. There was silence between us, not angry, just heavy. She was my fiancé, he added, like that excused it. She was my sister, I said. Didn't stop her. Mark looked up at me then, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Shame. The real kind. I want to help fix this, he said. I don't know if it'll matter, but I've got access to internal legal memos. Her firm was quietly coordinating with the senator's attorneys, preparing talking points, even planting doubts about you in media circles before the tribunal. My stomach turned. So it wasn't just sabotage. It was strategic. Exactly, he said. They created a character portrait of you. Julia gave them the brush. The firm painted the picture. He slid a flash drive across the table. This is everything I could copy without triggering internal flags. You'll find meeting minutes, email threads, strategy outlines. Julia's name is on at least 6 of them. She didn't just burn you. She helped protect Rollins from the fallout. I stared at the drive, then at him. Why now? I asked. Mark took a long breath. Because I saw what she really is, and because I let myself fall in love with the version she built for the world. Calculated, compassionate, ambitious. But under that, he shook his head. I don't know if I ever actually knew her. I nodded once. Welcome to the club. We left the cafe without hugging, without any dramatic closure, just a quiet exchange of truth. He got in his car and didn't look back, but I did. And when I got home, I plugged in the flash drive. Julia's name was everywhere. My hands shook as I read the subject lines. Mitigating EF fallout. Op-ed suppression strategy. Memo, tribunal narrative. They'd built a campaign to ruin me, with my sister as the face of it. But now I had the receipts. And soon, the world would too. The invitation came the next morning. A white envelope, hand-delivered. Julia's handwriting again, loopy and neat. Family dinner, Thursday at 7, formal, intimate. It reeked of a performance. I almost threw it in the trash, but something in me, something sharper than curiosity, wanted to see her up close. I wanted to look her in the eye and let her wonder how much I knew. Let her sweat. The vineyard's dining room was dressed to impress. A long walnut table stretched beneath a chandelier, wine glasses set with military precision. Julia had spared no expense. Or maybe she was just trying to keep the illusion alive. She greeted me with that fake smile again, her voice sugary and clipped. "Emma, you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my tone even. Margaret was already seated at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. She acknowledged me with the barest nod, like I was a contractor, not her daughter. Mark sat 2 seats down from me, eyes flicking between Julia and me like he couldn't believe this was really happening. Dinner started with Pinot and salmon mousse. Julia gave toast between courses. She praised the vineyard, the legacy, the family. Her voice never wavered, but the glances she kept stealing in my direction told me everything. She was trying to measure how much I knew. "Emma," she said during dessert, that same fake charming tone. "Tell us about your blog. You're still doing stories on freelance lifestyle pieces?" "Some," I said, "but lately I've been working on something a little more investigative." "Oh?" Her smile tightened. I set my fork down, nice and slow. "Yeah, something involving strategic media suppression, corporate PR, political laundering." The air shifted. Margaret looked up sharply. Mark froze. I let it hang there, watching Julia's mask slip a fraction. Just a flicker, barely a blink, but it was there. "Interesting," Julia said, voice light. "Sounds familiar?" "It should," I said casually. "It involves someone who knows the inner workings of PR manipulation, intimately." Her jaw clenched. I turned to Margaret. "You ever wonder how the senator dodged every ethics complaint, even when the documents leaked?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "I assumed they were fabricated." "Of course," I said. "Unless someone close to him had help, spinning a narrative, crafting a public message, quietly discrediting anyone who got too close." Mark didn't move. He didn't have to. The look on his face said he knew exactly what I was doing. And so did Julia. Her voice dropped a shade. "Careful, Emma," I smiled. "Why?" "You're implying serious things." "Oh, I'm not implying anything," I said. "Not yet. But you should probably keep your calendar open. I'm guessing there'll be some questions coming soon." Margaret stiffened. "What questions?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Legal ones." Nobody touched their dessert after that. I stayed long enough to let the tension thicken like old wine. Then I stood, kissed Margaret on the cheek out of habit, and turned to Julia one last time. "Lovely dinner." "Really?" Then I walked out into the cool vineyard night, head high, heart steady. Because for the first time, she knew, I wasn't bluffing. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped into my house. The door was locked. No signs of forced entry. Nothing looked disturbed, until I reached my desk. The top drawer was open, inside where I kept USB drives, notepads, and the hard copies of my interview transcripts. Everything was still there, except one thing. A blank USB stick sat dead center, right on top of my notes. No label, no message. Just there, waiting. I stared at it, heart pounding. It was clean, brand new, still shiny. It hadn't been there when I left for groceries an hour ago. I didn't touch it. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Clara. "They've been here," I said. Her voice sharpened. "Are you okay?" "I think so, but someone got inside. Left a USB on my desk." She didn't hesitate. "That's a message." "I know." Within an hour, Alex was on a video call, calm and methodical. "Do not plug that thing in. I'll scan it remotely if you want, but it's probably a digital fingerprint trap, something they can trace." I nodded. "They're watching." "More than that," he said. "They're scared." He was right. It was a warning, not an attack. A soft tap on the shoulder. A reminder that Julia still had reach, that she was paying attention. Clara called back that night. "I talked to someone I trust," she said. ex-IT guy from Julia's firm. After he left, he told me she had a private contractor build filters to monitor mentions of her name in watchdog sites and investigative platforms. She knows when anyone even breathes near a story. I exhaled. And now she knows I'm not just breathing, I'm moving. And she'll try to stop you, Clara said. Just like she stopped you before. Alex called again 10 minutes later, his voice urgent. I ran a quick probe. Her firm's servers pinged 3 of your outgoing emails to national outlets. You sent anything recently? I nodded. Preliminary statements. Nothing with evidence yet. They tried to block them, he said. Redirected them to junk folders using metadata flags. Subtle, but traceable. Jesus, I muttered. They're actively suppressing contact. Yeah, he said. That's not PR. That's digital sabotage. I sat in the dark for a long time after the calls ended, staring at that blank USB stick like it was ticking. She was scared. That's what it meant. Julia, always composed, always in control, had resorted to intimidation. Because for once, I had the leverage. I stayed up until dawn, typing, drafting my official statement for the press, for the lawyers, for the record. A detailed timeline of Julia's connections to Rollins, Clara's testimony, Mark's documents, screenshots, memos, emails, names. I backed up everything, twice, sent copies to 3 people I trusted. By the time the sun rose, I had a full press kit ready. I wasn't going to be silent. Not now. Not ever again. And no amount of empty USB sticks was going to stop me. It started with a single article. Alex sent it to me at 8:02 a.m. A feature in a respected independent news outlet titled, PR Powerhouse Linked to Political Cover-Up. Insider documents reveal coordinated smear campaign. There it was. Julia's name, in bold, in print. By noon, the story had exploded. Alex had timed the leaks perfectly. Clara's testimony, the redacted internal memos, Mark's legal briefs, all distributed across multiple outlets, whistleblower forums, watchdog organizations. Even a few major media sites picked it up within hours. And suddenly, Julia's polished empire began to crack. Clients started backing out by the end of the day. The PR firm released a vague statement about restructuring. Margaret Foster's name, previously associated with quiet boardroom power and polished charity events, was suddenly being dragged into headline subtext. Family ties questioned in PR-fueled disinformation case. I watched it all unfold from the small corner desk in my apartment, still in sweatpants, sipping lukewarm coffee. I didn't feel joy. I felt clarity. By day 2, Julia's LinkedIn page had gone dark. A reporter reached out for a comment. She declined. The firm's CEO, once one of Julia's biggest cheerleaders, issued a damage control memo by the 3rd day, distancing the company from rogue decision-making. But it was too late. The internet doesn't forget. And the paper trail didn't lie. They published screenshots of the Discredit EF email chain, the cover page of the risk management strategy that Clara had saved, a timeline infographic showing how Julia's meetings lined up perfectly with the senator's legal victories. And in the center of it all, my name, not as a disgraced journalist, but as the whistleblower who was right all along. Clara and I appeared on a joint podcast interview the next week. She spoke calmly, clearly, laid it out piece by piece. I could tell she was terrified, but she was also done being afraid. We were told to neutralize a narrative, she said, not challenge it, not investigate it, just crush it. And you realized it was wrong? The host asked. I realized it too late, Clara said quietly, but Emma didn't. She tried to tell the truth, and we silenced her. By the end of the week, a congressional ethics committee had launched a preliminary review into Rollins' former staff and media affiliations. The senator's name trended on Twitter, for all the wrong reasons. Then came the official request. I was called to testify, not as a defendant, as a witness. I wore a gray blazer, the same one I hadn't touched since my last byline. I stood in front of the ethics panel with a copy of the original draft I'd written 5 years ago. This, I said into the microphone, holding up the paper, is the story that nearly ended my career, not because it was wrong, but because someone with more power decided the truth was inconvenient. I watched their faces as I laid it out, Julia's internal sabotage, the deliberate leak to Rollins' legal team, the weaponization of my mental health history. And then I looked at the chair where Julia would have been if she had the courage to show up. It was empty. The final question came from a gray-haired senator with tired eyes. "Miss Foster," he said, "why come forward now?" I didn't hesitate. Because silence protects power, and I've been quiet long enough. The room went still. That moment wasn't victory, it was vindication. A chance to finish the story the way it was meant to be told. Truthfully, publicly, and finally, on my own terms. 3 weeks later, I found the letter in my mailbox. A thick cream envelope with the seal of the National Journalism Alliance in the corner. For a second, I just stared at it, afraid to hope. Then I tore it open. Inside, a certificate restoring my press credentials, along with a formal commendation in recognition of journalistic integrity, resilience in the face of coordinated sabotage, and a continued commitment to truth. I read it twice. Then I laughed, quietly, in disbelief. The kind of laugh you let out when the ground finally stops shaking under your feet. I tucked the letter into my bag and drove to the coast. There was a cafe I'd always loved in Newport, just off the main road, with a view of the sea and the kind of burnt coffee you drink for the smell more than the taste. Clara was already there when I arrived, seated by the window, typing something on her laptop. She looked up and smiled. "Let me guess. They reinstated you." I pulled the letter out and slid it across the table. "Better. They want me to help build an independent nonprofit for silenced reporters." Clara raised her eyebrows. "They want you to be the watchdog for the watchdogs?" "Something like that," I said. We clinked mugs, mine full of lukewarm drip, hers with some herbal thing I refused to try. "What do we call it?" she asked. "Truthline," I said. "Or maybe Red Pen." She smirked. "You're going to hate naming this." I nodded. "Yeah, but I'm going to love building it." We sat there for a while, watching waves crash against the rocks. Neither of us speaking. We didn't need to. Everything that needed saying had already been said. In testimonies, in memos, in headlines. I checked my phone once, out of habit. One missed call. "Mark." I called him back. "Hey," he said, voice cautious. "I got your message." He paused. "I just wanted to say thank you for seeing through all of it, for giving me the chance to help." "You didn't have to," I said. "But you did. That matters." "I've left Julia," he said suddenly. "If you didn't already know." "I figured," I said. She tried to spin it like I betrayed her. "I guess that's what she tells herself now." "She betrayed herself," I said quietly. "I just pulled the curtain back." Mark sighed. "So what's next?" I glanced at Clara. She was sketching ideas on a napkin, chewing the end of a pen. "Something honest," I said. "Something better." "Good," Mark said. "You deserve it." That night, I drove home with the windows down. The air was cool, and the sky above the trees was a soft orange that faded into pale gray. Julia and Margaret were under investigation now, for fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. Every day more came out, and every day fewer people defended them. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about a small newsroom on the coast, about reporters who needed a lifeline, about building something that couldn't be buried. I was no longer the story they told about me. I was the one writing the next chapter. And this time, it would be mine.